Hello and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast here. Thank you for downloading another audio array of terrible tales from the very, very sinful Radio 2 audience. This week's concise collection includes a fiery falconry furore, a dastardly drive-by fruiting, a snog-free séance, and a corrupt college competition. Who will you forgive? Let us know. Here it all comes. The collective is in, and the dean is back.
I thought I might.
Thank you. No other offers offering you pecuniary advantage?
Not this evening, no.
So here we are. Let's try and get through this. This is from Jim. Thank you very much. Dear Caring Confessional Collective and Mad.
Yeah, I think we all know how this is going to go.
It says it.
This is becoming a regular thing now.
They're excluding you.
Yeah.
I would like to confess to my uneducated, instinctual actions from around a year ago. I'd purchased a gift for my wife to do some falconry. Okay, so as soon as I got to that, I don't think we've had a falconry-based confession.
I don't think
so
we
this is our first.
Obvious gift.
A long-held dream of hers to do. This was out in the country, as we are East Anglia based, and took a long time due to the sat-nav being unable to connect postcodes to random fields. After slightly harassed conversation regarding the sat-nav and my driving between me and my then-girlfriend, we made it. On arrival, we saw a wide gathering of people, small children, teenagers and adults, all from a variety of backgrounds. Two that appeared to stick out from this group were a couple of cyclists, one of whom was a mammal, which, as you know, is middle-aged man in lycra, and his female partner. Being the friendly type, we started chatting to them, mainly due to the curious nature of why they chose to bike into the middle of nowhere. It was explained to us that they were German and on a biking holiday and had seen the falconry experience and decided to do it on their way to the next location. I was amazed how they stood there in that freezing field in just their skimpy lycra of tight shorts and a little short-sleeved top. While we were mostly in jackets and trousers. However, we soon got distracted by the falconer, who started gutting and chopping up a variety of furry creatures, whilst discussing the selection of falcons and birds that he had brought. The falconer had a lovely leather satchel, which he proceeded to grab bits of the ripped-up creatures out of. Well, sorry about this, by the way.
You have to go into this detail. Some people are eating. We're eating.
Red in tooth and claw,
It's
isn't
nature. It's just the way it's all intended.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Anyway.
Bit crunchy in places.
Yes. We were chatting about what he was going to be doing. He started this falconer chap to hand out some leather gauntlets, some large, which went almost up to the elbow, some quite small, just covering the wrist. This is important for later. He then proceeded to take us out into the field. Here he produced a small falcon with a deft flick of the falconer's wrist, flew up to a tall pillar around 20 feet tall with a ledge on the top. The falconer then, handing out a small piece of critter lamb, I think that must be, or gut to us. We would then use this to entice the bird to swoop down from the pillar, gracefully land on our gauntlets, and stand on our leather glove and eat the tasty morsel from our gloved hand. The falconer, and only when the falconer was with us could we do this, would then come around, swiftly raise our hand, and the bird would detach its talons from the glove and fly off to the next person, who would be strategically placed around 20 metres away, so we could see these graceful birds in close up.
Excellent.
This process continued through with another falcon, then an owl, and then the falconer produced two very large Harris hawks. It is around Harris hawks, indeed. It is around here that things went a little wrong, much to my wife's shock and embarrassment. The falconer moved around to me and the German mammal, who were still standing next to us, giving us both a small morsel of tasty meat selection. The Harris hawks by this point were separated, with one person and another one up on the pillar. The first hawk gracefully flew through the crowd, through the observers, to my German companion, landing on his small gauntlet glove. The huge talons gripped the glove while it ripped the flesh out of his hand and swallowed whilst looking elegant. While he, the German, looked on with admiration, inspecting this fine specimen of a hawk only inches from his face. And now it was my turn. Down swooped another hawk onto my much larger leather glove, quickly gulping down its treat of what I could only make out as part of a chicken's leg, I think. I was in awe of its huge stature, its beady eyes that appeared to analyse everything around it, and of course his sharp, powerful beak and talons. After admiring this beautiful bird for what seemed like some time, I thought it was time to be generous, really, and let someone else have a go with the bird. And I had the ingenious idea and decided it was, I was now kind of really an official falconer, really. And my previous experience in lifting the bird off my glove with my previous 5 attempts, I knew it, really. So instead of waiting for the real falconer to raise my arm, to encourage the hawk to fly off, I thought I'd do it myself. So he would gracefully fly off, swooping down onto his perch or to the next person with a chick's leg in his hand, and that would be that. Unfortunately, it didn't work out like that. It went like this. Raising my arm sharply, I realised that the bird wasn't actually prepared for flight and was now instead flung into the air sharply. In a panic, the poor hawk, startled, really, decided to fly to the nearest stable point. Unfortunately, the nearest stable point was the German mammal's bare arm, as he was still holding onto the other hawk. Not only did the poor German now have a Harris hawk clawing into his arm to try to stabilise itself, we quite quickly realised that these two birds didn't actually like each other very much, and started fighting on his bare arm. The blood flowed. The German was magnificent as he proceeded to hold these two fighting hawks on his arm until the real falconer came across to separate the two brawling birds. It didn't end there. Once the falconer had got the birds off his arm, it resulted in one of the hawks flying to the top of the pillar, quickly followed by the other angry hawk. At the top of the post, they started a vicious fight, while the falconer shouted at them from below. They continued to fight while tangled together, falling impressively to the ground, where they were finally separated. The falconer then took his chance, grabbed one of the hawks, put him back in his cage. He reassured us that they were both fine and that it looked more aggressive than it actually was. The German appeared fine too, and only had a few deep gouges in his arm, and didn't appear too angry with me either. So clearly I need forgiveness for injuring the German man, who seemed nice and definitely impressed me by biking into the cold, and mainly by holding two fighting hawks on his bleeding bare arm with an apparent amount of ease, for ruining the falconry, as we were the only two to hold the hawks whilst the others only got to see them fighting viciously, and mainly, again, for embarrassing my lovely now wife, who appears to know no end to the awkward and shameful situations I get her into. I'm in your hands of mercy, and also Matt's. Says Jim, that's what he thinks. Well, it's a good falconry-based confession. We'll take any of these that you might have, but let's see how Sister Rebecca takes it.
Well, I'm very impressed by the German and his bare arm and his manliness in not complaining about the fact his arm was being ripped to shreds by this hawk. I think Jim was just showing off, wasn't he? He was trying to show that he'd mastered falconry and all that kind of thing. But, you know, if the falconer had been more explicit in his instructions and said, do not try and attempt to let this
I think he probably
go
had.
before. Do you think? Oh, did he?
He said, don't raise your arm.
In that case, I completely blame Jim. Jim, you're not forgiven.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Dean?
It's true, isn't it? It's true. He did say, somewhere in the text it did say that you mustn't raise your arm unless I tell you to, till the falconer tells you to. However, well done to the German, and he gave a lot of entertainment to the people there, I would have thought, and a bit of interesting falconry. Why not? Livened it up a bit. Fantastic.
Good. Well, here we go, wasn't he? Yes, and Matthew.
Well, let's face facts here. The German who gets his arm ripped up by the birds, he's going to have an amazing story that he is going to be telling to people for years to come. And in fact, he's boring people already with that time when I was over in Britain and I got my arm and there was a hawk and a falcon
Two
and
hawks.
fighting over me. They were, and people are buying him drinks even now. So Jurgen's done very well out of this. So I am definitely.
Stereotypes.
No. It might have been called. It could have been called Hans. Who knows? A lot of German names. So I am going to forgive, just because he's going to love that story.
2-1.
Jurgen.
So we have tonight's confession. This comes from Mr. Tim Adams, it says at the end here, which is very specific. I imagine it's been changed.
We've obviously changed that.
We've obviously changed it, yes. It's all been changed. Yeah. Dear Father Simon and the Gather Collective, my confession goes back to a foggy, cold and dank early 70s Saturday afternoon. I got an A- once for that introduction in an English essay, says Tim Adams. An incident which has been playing on my mind for many years. I was born in Leicester in 1960. Become a follower of Leicester City Football Club as a small boy after being taken to the old Filbert Street ground, as was, on a number of occasions, by my reluctant father, who would always shout, "Useless yobbos!" I imagine that's at the crowd or at the teams. I don't know. He just says useless yobbos in quotes. However, Dad gained promotion in his role as the insurance man And we had to up sticks and move to the hitherto unheard-of hinterland of Peterborough, which felt like a million miles away to me after making the journey in Dad's company car, the latest Morris Minor. Probably only took about an hour in reality. After a few years of travelling backwards and forwards to see the occasional match, Dad was upgraded to a new Ford Escort, and in celebration promised to take me to the next big FA Cup match at Filbert Street. I knew that this meant I may have to wait a number of years, or probably until I'd passed my driving test, but it was still an enticing proposition, as my new hero, goalkeeper Peter Shilton, was now a regular in the side, and I was yet to see him play in the flesh, or his new popular grass-green jersey. As it turned out, I didn't have to wait too long. From the August to March 1971, although it did feel like a lifetime, when Arsenal were drawn away to Leicester in the 6th round. Do you remember that, Matt?
This is memory lane time, this.
Yeah. My memory of the game is pretty non-existent, but I do seem to remember quite a lot of fog for half of the game, obscuring the other end of the ground to our seats where Arsenal were attacking. So, of course, we had to guess what was happening at the other end from the noise of the Arsenal fans, because we couldn't see anything. I think the result was a 0-0 draw. We left the ground and we made our way back to the car. As if going to see my beloved Foxes wasn't a treat enough, my father always let me have a fish and chip tea from the renowned local chippy on the outskirts of Leicester before we made our way home. Tonight was no exception, and we sat gleefully stuffing our faces full of greasy cod and chips from the Leicester Mercury newspaper whilst listening to Sports Report on the gleaming new Escort radio, and a report of the Leicester game, filling in the details that we'd missed because of the fog and confirming that it was indeed a goalless draw. Now, one of the conditions of me being able to have fish and chips was that I had to have a nice Granny Smith apple afterwards, because my mother insisted that the inside of my greasy mouth required neutralising with the acidic apple, and my teeth would benefit in the long run. What? Now, I never really let on that I absolutely hated Granny Smith apples then, as I do now, as the sharpness is just too much for me, as I may... Might as well have a fresh lemon squeezed into my mouth, but I wasn't prepared to jeopardise the contra deal against the finest Grimsby fish. Dad passed me the apple as we set off for our hour-long journey home. The taste of the apple made my face take on that dog chewing a wasp appearance, and I just wasn't in the mood for it. As the time had now moved on to past 6 p.m, it had become very dark, and as we drove along a very well-to-do lane towards the A47 and the long road home, I worked out that Dad wouldn't actually be able to see the apple and how much I had or hadn't eaten to date. "What do you want me to do with the core, Dad?" I asked. "Well, you ate that quickly, boy. Are you sure you finished it?" "Of course, Dad," I lied. "OK, well done. You can throw it out of the window then."
Of course.
Right, fine. Yeah.
That's what we did in those days.
Well, Tim Adams says, now I know that throwing things out of windows is always a silly thing to do, but I believe many or most of your listeners will have chucked an apple core from a car onto the hedgerow. I think this is probably true.
Back to nature.
So I wound down the window and hurled it out into the slightly still misty dark night. Now, although only 11 years old, I was already a reasonable cricketer, having followed my father's love for the game, and I'd practised throwing a cricket ball on a regular basis. The virtually whole intact apple bounced once on the wide grass verge of the avenue, aided by the speed of the new Escort 1.1 Popular, and in perfect slow motion rose up and struck the chin of a young teenage boy who was walking along the roads towards us with his mate. It hit him full on, and he fell to the floor like a sack of potatoes.
No.
As we carried on, my father, none the wiser to the carnage left in our wake, made a comment on how strong my arm had become. I looked back over my shoulder aghast as the boy lay prone on the floor.
Dear.
I blushed embarrassment at my actions. That action alone would suffice as reason to seek out the nearest confessional box for forgiveness from the boy. However, what happened next still makes me cringe even further. Boy number one, to my initial relief, promptly picked himself up off the floor and immediately felled his mate with a right hook.
No!
Mike Tyson would have been proud of, obviously assuming it was him who'd landed the first punch.
Oh, no.
In contrast, a mere Audley Harrison powder puff of a Granny Smith apple. By now we'd disappeared into the welcome fog of the night, and I sat silently living with my guilt for the remainder of the journey and my life. So now is the time to seek forgiveness, initially from my father for lying about an uneaten Granny Smith, which I have still not become used to eating. I also seek forgiveness from the first boy who took the apple on the chin at a speed akin to a Mitchell Johnson bouncer and was felled without warning. And thirdly, and in hindsight probably the greatest victim, from the second boy who, having been innocently walking along the road with his mate, curiously saw him fall to the ground in a heap before getting up and having his own lights punched out for no reason at all. Yours, Mr. Tim Adams. Anyway, there you go.
That's a good one.
Don't chuck things out of cars.
No, well, we did what we did in those days.
I think a little apple core has often been thrown. But anyway,
Yeah.
Tim is pointing. It's an interesting tale, and who would have thought he would have felled a guy who then get up and fell the guy next to him, thinking it was his. Anyway, the Leicester City stuff was a diversion, as it turned out.
It was.
Sister Rebecca.
Yeah, the apple core is biodegradable, so it's fine, isn't it? But yeah, throwing a whole Granny Smith out the window.
Out the car window is
I think it's a bit
dangerous.
dangerous, isn't
Yeah,
it?
well,
When
as
you're
it
going at
turned
speed. Yeah. I mean, obviously, the boy that he hit with the apple wasn't hurt because he got up immediately and hit
Yeah.
his friend.
Yeah.
I think, actually, the boy who hit his friend, how do you mistake an apple hitting you in the chin
Yeah.
for
He might have
someone
been
punching
concussed.
you
He
who's
might have
standing
been
next to you?
he might have been concussed
Maybe he
or
was
something.
concussed.
You don't see it coming.
I know, but also, they can't have been great mates, can they? If they just, regularly hit each other as they're walking along.
It's not their fault.
I don't know. I think I'm going to forgive Mr. Tim Adams because he didn't know it was going to happen, and he just didn't like the apple very much.
What do you think, Dean?
Well, I don't know that I can, you see, because on balance, you're right, you shouldn't really throw things out of cars. The apple is biodegradable, I accept that. I've done that myself many times. Back to nature is what I'm thinking. It all goes back to the earth and all that sort of stuff. But, I mean, just out of the blue, this poor guy, an apple just hits him. He falls over, so he obviously was hurt to a certain extent. And to the other boy as well. I mean, just whacked in the face for no apparent reason. Well, we know the reason, and it was all to do with Tim. So on balance, I'm afraid I can't forgive. Don't worry about Dad. Dad's fine with the apple. He didn't really
he
sing
doesn't know
anyway,
anything.
So. Yeah, he's blissfully
Dad.
unaware.
Matthew.
Well, I mean, obviously we don't condone throwing fruit out of windows, but a dark part of all of us thought, "My, that is an amazing shot." Well, I mean, obviously, very sad for the boy involved, but that is a pretty impressive shot. However, I am going to forgive, but I am not going to forgive the mother in this story. What's this idea? You've got to have fruit with your chips? No,
to balance it out.
You're having the chips. Maybe the chips aren't great for you, but there's no point in having fruit.
No, I get that. I get what she was thinking.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
What was she thinking?
Well, she was thinking chips bad, apple good, therefore
Yeah.
overall
No.
fine.
It's like going into a takeaway place and say, I'm going to go large, but I'll have the diet drink as well.
I'll do that.
It's absolutely pointless. You're going to either have it and have it all,
Gets rid of the
or
guilt.
not bother at all.
Gets rid of
So
the guilt.
it's the mother's fault for insisting on the apple.
Hello, Mum.
And so, therefore...
And so forgiven.
Here we go with another drive time confession from Mr. Supply Teacher.
This is going to be good.
Why do you think it's going to be
No,
good?
straight away.
Do you like it?
Yeah.
That's how it's signed, Mr. Supply Teacher. Dear Father Simon and the custodians of the Temple of Love.
Oh, yeah. I like it even more.
Yeah, I thought you would. I write to confess an event that took place almost 25 years ago today, when I was a 15-year-old pupil at a secondary school in East Yorkshire. My parents moved there midway through my secondary school education when my father took a new job on the oil rigs off the East Coast. And I was advised all would be okay, as I had a distant cousin Andy at the school with whom I could be friends. Now, there was a problem with this idea. I was typical of my generation and enjoyed a trip to the video shop more than a trip to the library, where I would rent fun but intellectually unstimulating entertainment, typically martial arts, horror and comedy films, sometimes of a certificate beyond my years, as my mum was keen to have me babysit my younger sister. Well, my dad was away at sea, so she could visit her friends, so I didn't pay too much attention to the certificates, if you see what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
What's more, I liked rock and rap and metal, probably inspired by the soundtracks to many now classic 80s films that I watched. I also coasted happily along in the middle set at school, waiting for the next break time, while daydreaming about starring in a zombie comedy action film, much the same way as I imagine Simon Pegg may have done.
Or Matt Williams.
Indeed. My cousin, however, the aforementioned Andy, was the archetypal perfect cousin. Top set, good at sport, and a bookworm. More recently, he had fallen under the influence of intellectual archetypes, who I shall call Will and Tarquin.
Oh, excellent.
They would talk about classical literature, their father's homebrew wine, and listen to the Smiths and The Cure, analysing the lyrics and trying their hardest to look pained and sensitive. I found myself on the edge of this group, but refused to walk away and find new friends for one reason.
Why?
Girls. Apparently, being sensitive and poetic was attractive to the opposite sex, and being a raging whirlwind of hormones, I wasn't about to rock the boat with my impressions of Bluto from Animal House or Booger from Revenge of the Nerds. So, when the group were invited as potential sixth form students to the sixth form Valentine Ball, I was part of the group. And though I wasn't in the top set for maths, even I realised that equal numbers of boys and girls in our group meant that I had a decent chance of a sympathy snog by the end of the night.
A sympathy snog?
A sympathy snog. You ever had one of those?
No, not recently,
Okay.
no.
The boys had clearly never watched any of the horror films that I had, because they'd decided with their combined intellect to impress the girls by slipping off into the darkened school to hold a séance during the ball.
Oh, seance, good idea.
There you go.
Beautifully put.
I got to that line and thought, yes, I think this is fine. Anyone who has ever watched a horror film knows that this always ends with someone in a hockey mask appearing in the beam of a faulty torch and teaching the morally challenged teens a lesson with something pointy. However, I also didn't want to look like Victor Mature, the Viz character, and so snuck out of the school hall with a group of boys and girls to a far corridor on the first floor. No sooner had the group begun chalking out their letters in their séance on the floor by the light of the moon streaking through the post-war metal-framed windows than my equivalent number in the group of girls, Sarah, said she wanted to go back to the hall and asked me to take her. Being opposed to the idea of summoning the dead myself and not wishing to look scared, I took on the role of chivalrous knight and manfully agreed to escort her back to the hall with all of my 9¼ stone frame to protect her. It was on the way that I had an idea, and I asked Sarah if she'd like to play a little trick on the group rather than go back to the hall. Once we were back downstairs, we walked along the lower corridor until we were directly below the group. Being a post-war comprehensive, the school was made of concrete with metal-framed windows that could be opened with a metal hook on the end of an 8-foot pole. I remember these.
Yes.
Very
We used to have them around here for some of the blinds. Like
Anyway,
that one.
moving on.
I used to pull them down.
This 8-foot pole was kept in the corner of each classroom. Unfortunately for the séance group above, the first door I tried was unlocked, and I collected said window pole and delivered 3 hard bangs to the ceiling, which was, of course, the floor on which they sat. This was at half-second intervals. It's a bit like the Pips, actually, but...
Yeah, no, absolutely, but...
Thump, thump, thump.
Beautifully done. How does he do it?
The effect was immediate.
Yeah.
A collective scream from boys as well as girls,
No, don't scream.
I assume,
Don't scream.
erupted, following by what can only be described as the sounds of sensitivity, charm and chivalry being abandoned.
And everybody running off.
me. And we're back.
I can imagine the chaos, though. After 3 thumps like that, it must have been terrible. Frightening.
Thank you for the catch-up.
That's all right. Terrible business.
Sensitivity, charm and chivalry being abandoned as the thud-thud-thud of male shoes quickly left behind the frantic clippity-clop of high heels as the group ran for the hall. Being aware of what happens to the smarty pants who play tricks on people in darkened schools or abandoned fun fairs, I seized Sarah by the hand and we ran back to the hall to cover our misdemeanour by looking as if we'd been there all along. To my knowledge, neither my cousin, Tarquin, or Will got a snog off the girls that night, having showed that under their collective coats of cool beat the heart of a cowardly custard. I've never told my cousin, this our 40th year, that it was me he summoned and not Jim Morrison, and I'm in no way asking forgiveness from him or the other boys in the group, who should have watched more videos before thinking it was a good idea to mess about with dark forces to impress the girls. Nor do I ask forgiveness of the girls who overlooked these scruffy, plain, mediocre guys like myself at school because we were no Brad Pitt or potential brain surgeon. However, I do ask forgiveness from Sarah for failing to ask her for a snog on Valentine's Day.
Very wise.
Well, that seems like a good place to finish. Mr. Supply Teacher is asking for the forgiveness from Rebecca.
Seances are a really, really bad idea. In my experience, I'm not going to tell you why or what happened.
Why? What happened?
No.
Come on, you can't
no,
leave it there.
absolutely not. I don't even want to think about it. Anyway, really bad idea. So I think they shouldn't have done it, and in a way they had it coming, didn't they? Because they let themselves open to being terrified by the 3 thumps from below. I'm sure Sarah doesn't mind that she wasn't asked for a snog by Mr. Supply Teacher, so I'm going to forgive you.
Yeah, I'm going to forgive you. If that's all you're asking for is forgiveness from Rebecca, then I think you got away lightly. Really,
Well, what else is there?
Well, you'd need to apologise to the people, the group above, really, shouldn't you? Because you were terrifying. Like, anything could have happened. But you're not asking for that anyway. It's just for the sympathy snog from Rebecca that you didn't quite get, or any sort of snog.
Or Sarah, even.
Or Sarah. Oh, was it Sarah?
Yes.
Sarah, yes, Sarah. Sarah.
Well, whatever. We changed the name anyway.
We changed the names anyway to protect the innocent.
Probably changed it all back again now.
We probably have to.
Yes.
But yes, so I forgive on this occasion.
See what, Brother Matthew? I reckon you're a regular Tarquin, really. On the
Well,
quiet.
no, I mean,
though,
first of all, Will and Tarquin. I mean, Lord save us from pained and sensitive teenagers. Oh, look at me with my inner child. No, we're not interested. Not interested in you. But I do love the reference to Viz Comic and Victor Mature. Excellent stuff. Well done. In fact, for that alone, I'm going to forgive. Going to forgive just for that.
Very
Well
good.
done.
The novice joins us for our Foodie Thursday confession. Welcome. It's fresh from the slopes of where were you?
Yeah, I've been in St Anton, that's in Australia. Very nice too, and not limping too much. Bit.
But a thoroughly successful few
Yes,
days.
great few days, yes.
Well, there's a slight foodie element actually to our confession, which sometimes happens on a Thursday. This is from Edward. Edward sends in tonight's tale. Simon, you know why I write I seek forgiveness for an act of dishonesty that, although took place nearly 30 years ago, still weighs heavy on me today. Throughout the 80s, I attended a small country primary school near Tewkesbury, with fewer than 100 pupils in total. There were many close friendships and a tight-knit community between parents, teachers and children. I'm ashamed to confess that, though through one selfish and ill-thought-out act, I betrayed that trust for which I now seek closure. It all began in the week leading up to the school fete. In those days, the school fete was a significant date on the calendar, a time when winning cherry panda pops on the tombola and spending 10 minutes on a bouncy castle, usually straight after necking the same panda pop, was a child's idea of heaven. Anyone ever have one of those?
Yeah, cherry panda pops. Yeah.
Was that the It's Frothy Man?
Yes. Yeah, a bit like that. Yeah.
Was it like that?
Yes.
Bit lethal with a bouncy castle combo,
Yes, well,
wasn't it?
no,
Yes.
that's
That was Cresta. Those Frothy Man was Cresta.
Oh, really? Oh, right.
Come on,
okay.
let's get our children's fizzy drinks
Of
right.
course, yeah.
Our school used the summer fete to raise much-needed funds. They would help towards running costs and the chance to improve the equipment and facilities for the pupils. One year the school sent out a letter of request for parents to help out with ideas for how to raise money in the run-up to the big day. My mum, being a good Christian lady, always keen to help others and do her bit for the community, duly stepped up. She created a Guess the Number of Sweeties in the Jar competition, which I would be entrusted to run during break times. She cleaned out a very large marmalade jar and meticulously counted out every single dolly mixture. She'd even handed me a small ledger book, pre-formatted so that it would make it easy for me to quickly write the names of the children against the number they'd guessed. The reaction I got on Monday morning was incredible. Walking through the school gates into a bustling playground with a large jar brimful of vivid, sugary treats was enough to get a swarm of attention without even trying. It was 10 pence a guess. Not an insignificant amount of money for any primary school pupil to start with in 1987. 10p could have bought you a packet of Space Invaders, Tangy Toms, or for 2p more, Monster Munch. So clearly the stakes were high, but the prize was great. That day many children tried their luck. Most spent quite a while considering their estimate. Examining the jar, approximating the weight, needless to say, most guesses were absolute rubbish. Either stupidly low, someone said 10, or ridiculously high, one boy guessed 10 million. Excellent. Anyway, I worked diligently and carefully to write down names and collect their 10p pieces in a small zipped purse Mum provided. By Wednesday, many children were still having guesses. The ones who'd forgot to bring in money earlier in the week and a few who felt compelled to have another go. I relished the attention this sweetie competition was bringing me, and I admit that my ego got the better of me. When one child tried to trick me into telling him how many sweets were in the jar, I suddenly realised I didn't know. And at this point, and for the first time, curiosity took a powerful grip. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but even now, my mum would admit that actually telling me that the answer could be found taped to the underside of the lid was a mistake. In her innocent eyes, the first time the lid would be removed would be during Friday's assembly, when the winner was to be dramatically announced. Well, finding a secluded area of the school playing field, I managed to carefully unwrap the tape that Mum had placed around the lid, presumably because she anticipated some form of tampering. I prized it open. I read the number inside, and I now knew the answer. I could act with smug knowingness every time a fellow pupil made their guess. But being smug was not the only vice that took me over that day. My first thought in finding out the answer was to check to see who'd win, and as it turned out, nobody had the right answer. So in a moment of naive stupidity that could only ever make sense to a sugar-crazed 8-year-old, I grabbed 10p from my own pocket and I entered the competition.
Oh, outstanding.
Using my own name.
Oh, brilliant. Even better.
The wait till Friday's assembly was agonising. Knowing you're going to win isn't always the best feeling, especially when you've cheated. And as I sat cross-legged on the hall floor waiting for the moment when the headmaster would declare me as lucky winner, I started to imagine the angry faces of my fellow pupils who would surely question the manner of my victory. Oh, what do you think? I started to feel rather sick and could barely look at the head teacher when he began to read out the result. So remember, this is from Edward, this confession. And the winner is, said the headmaster, Angela. Shocked, I looked up and couldn't believe what had just happened. That wasn't my name, it's Angela's name. But why hadn't I won? Turns out that I'd left a subtle clue that this competition may not have been run exactly fairly. Not just because A, I was the winner, but because B, I had guessed exactly the right number. And I mean exactly 432 on the nose. I think it was obvious. Trying to enter your own competition is stupid enough, but not creating a plausible margin of error, just to throw the others off the scent, was downright stupid and idiotic. I was momentarily relieved at not being declared winner, but facing difficult questions from my friends. But also wondered why Angela had won the second best guess after mine, and the true winner of the sweets was my best friend John, who'd been surprisingly close to the real answer, just 3 sweets away. So here we go. I need forgiveness from my mum, who through her own effort and expense entrusted me with a simple duty for which I let her down badly, and for which she had to face the embarrassment of a phone call from the headmaster. But mainly to my best friend John, who through the bad luck of choosing me as a best friend, was robbed of his rightful prize of a large jar of Dolly mixtures. Because the headmaster assumed collusion with me.
Oh, no.
John still doesn't know how close he got to winning the best prize a child could ask for. And I continue to wear the guilt to this day. Sister Rebecca.
Well, he was pretty incompetent, wasn't he? He could have just put 429 or 430, put the exact number. So not only was he immoral, but he also, was incompetent. And he also felt guilty the minute he put the ticket in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was nothing good that came out of that, was there? So I think also poor John had to suffer for that. And his poor mother must have been mortified by having the headmaster ring her to say that he'd cheated. So, yeah, Edward, I can't forgive you.
I just like the idea of entering your own competition and getting it exactly right and using your own name. Novice Nigel.
I can't believe that no one's ever had the conversation, around the family dinner table since then, saying, hey, remember that Sweetie in a Jar competition? It doesn't sound like they have. They obviously just knew it, and that's had to weigh really heavily on it.
John never knew. John still doesn't know.
No, John doesn't, and Edward's never had a conversation with his mum. Angela, she had a complete bonus score, didn't she, of all those Dolly mixtures? But being a complete numpty on this occasion, Edward, really, I hope you have learned, because I'm definitely not going to forgive you on this occasion.
Brother Matthew, here we go.
This prompts a confession of my own on this, really. I always, when I go to weddings, I always do a book on how long the best man's speech is going to be. And I went to a certain person's wedding, I'm not going to name, and I got...
your brothers?
No. No, and I got the time bang on.
Because you knew?
Because I knew. And it was like 120 quid. That's a lot of money.
That is outrageous.
So,
what a confession.
But I did buy everyone drinks, so that makes it
Half
all
a
okay on my table.
How
I think,
did you know?
do you know what?
Did it run exactly because you'd rehearsed it with him or something?
No. I knew because I'd asked him. Anyway, it doesn't matter how that happened. What's important is
morals of a
that
skunk.
everyone came out of it okay in the end. And which
you.
of us wouldn't do the same? None of us. That's who. So let's forgive Edward because we're all pretty much in the same boat.
No, we're not.
Yes, we
you
are.
sculders.
We're all in the same.
I would like
boat.
to know also where 1 in 10 million sweets boy, what he ended up doing 30 years later on, the one who guessed there were 10 million in the jar.
Yeah, or the guys thought there were 3.
He's probably an accountant.
It's probably an MP.
Or a banker.
There you go.
There you go. Satire.
Let's find out from Edward.
This week's confession, send us yours, please. Confessions@bbc.co.uk if that's just provoked a few small memories. More dramas for you next week. Don't forget to download the Weekly Mayo, available now and every Thursday. Thank you.